Hey YouTube, I'm back with another game featuring the queen shifts and the sacrifices on h6 or g6 or f7 as the case may be. The main theme of these videos has really been using the queen as to form batteries against the king side, forcing some sort of a king side weakness and then exploiting it. This game is rather distinct from the previous games. Previously, we've been looking at games where the queen goes to h3 or sometimes d3 in order to provoke this weakness. But here we're going to look at a different method of doing that. So after e4, c6, we're going to get another pan off. So we get c4, knight f6, and then just these standard moves here. And then here, white decides to go ahead and take. Now, I know frequently when you have these situations, it's kind of this standoff to decide who's going to capture first. And usually you don't want to be the one to capture because that represents a loss of time. However, white wants to play bishop to d3 here. But if he plays bishop d3, then black will take. He'll take back on c4, and if he wants to go back to d3, that means he spent 3 moves getting his bishop to d3. Now, just by capturing and then playing bishop to d3 immediately, he's done it in 2. So this represents a small savings in time, which is quite important. So he captures, take back with a knight, and then we play bishop to d3. So after knight c6, they both just castle, and rook e1, and now queen d6. So after this, we get the queen to c2, which is the sort of the new idea that we haven't really seen before yet. So the battery is immediately formed here against h7, which is going to provoke some sort of a weakness. G6 is what was played in the game, but if we look, there's this little shot that black sort of has whenever there's this battery here. If he tries to play knight to b4, trying to hopefully cut this up, then we're just going to take here. All right, this is a check. So he drops back, and then after queen b1, we see that he can trap the bishop, but we're just going to take, and this is going to look pretty awful. We've got 3 pawns already for the bishop, and the black's king is completely exposed. And we're going to quickly be able to bring the bishop and this rook, and even ideas like knight g4, knight e5, or knight e4 coming to f6 at some point. He's going to be able to quickly get pieces over there, and this king is just too exposed. So that's not a possibility yet. So instead of that, he doesn't play here. He plays g6 instead. Again, probably if knight f6, we probably see our common knight to g4, or excuse me, bishop to g5, and we would get some sort of a pawn weakness anyway. So after here, we play knight to c4, or knight to e4, which is immediately touching on some of these key squares in the holes that we've left, hitting the queen, of course. So queen c7, and now a3, because we really are threatening to take this this idea here with the knight to b4. And as we've stated many times before, you usually don't want to lose your light squared bishop. Though here we'll see later that given that he's changed the position of his queen, it doesn't really seem like he's going to be attacking the f6, or sorry, excuse me, the f7 and e6 squares. So this bishop doesn't play as a quite as important role, but you still don't want to give it up here. So we get bishop to d7, and now queen to d2, which is a cool idea. He's already formed his weakness here, and so the queen doesn't have any more work on c2. So he's just going to shift it over to the hole that was made here. So rook e8, trying to bring the bishop back so the bishop can defend here. And queen h6, and now bishop f8, and the queen comes back to h4. So the queen has now shifted to perhaps a more familiar place to what the games we've been seeing so far. So we get knight to c e7, trying to bring another defender into the game, and now knight eg5. Here black plays h6, trying to just kick the knight. White played knight to h3 here, but he actually misses an opportunity to capture here on f7. So if he captures, the king's going to take back, but then we get knight e5 check, and after the king goes back to g8, then we're going to be able to play bishop h6 here. Well, we should be able to. And so bishop h6, and after something like bishop c6, which is needed because he's going to want to get that queen across to help defend, after just bishop f8, and then the rook comes across, And then bishop to g6 here. Bishop takes. He's got 3 pawns again for the knight, and he has a pretty strong attack. Again, he's going to be able to lift his rooks and come over. And so this was an option that he had that he passed over. Instead, he chose to play knight to h3. Going back now. So after h6, we chose knight h3 here. And then black brings the knight up to f5. Oh, excuse me. He's got to defend this. He's got to defend this pawn first. Okay, so now we go knight f5, knight e5, and then knight f5, and he just lops it off. It's a really strong defending piece here on f5, hitting the queen. He doesn't want to have to kick his queen out and try to remaneuver. Plus, the knight blocks this bishop's influence anyway, so he goes ahead and just tries to give it up. So we get this. And then this is a nice idea. He's using this pin here to attack the f7 square. And when this f7 falls, the rest of the pawn formation is going to be quite weak here. So king to g8, and then we're going to grab that pawn. And now h5, because he was threatening to win this. So we go back to queen to g3, adding pressure here to the g6 square. These knights look monstrous. There's all kinds of holes in the king side, and those knights are really adept at jumping around in it. So we get to rook e6. The idea is obviously to defend the pawn there. We can't really take. I mean, I suppose we technically could, but I think if we took here, he would just take this knight, and that's probably not going to work out for us. So we get bishop to h6, and now bishop to e8. He really wants to get one of these knights or both of these knights out of the king position because they're so strong. So we get rook to c1. To bringing the last rook into the play with tempo here. So queen b6. And now he lops off this bishop. And black decides to go ahead and take the knight. And so he drops the bishop back, which ends up being a really key place for the bishop. The pressure that it's exerting on g6 is really interesting. So we get rook e8, which is bringing a last piece into it. And it seems like black's position is pretty solid. But white comes up with a kind of ingenious idea here. So he plays rook to c5, which is hitting this knight here. And then after f6, knight f6, he plays queen c3, which looks like he's just going to give up the exchange, or maybe even a whole rook if he's not careful. But so that's what black plays. But then we just sacrifice it here. And the thing that we really need to pay attention to is, just a moment ago there were 3 pieces on this diagonal. Now we're down to 2. But if there were none, all of a sudden queen to g7 would just be lights out. So of course he's got to take back here. But then the next moves come with tempo. He's going to clear this diagonal really quickly. So knight c5 hitting the queen. So of course the queen's got to move. And the queen drops back. And now d5. And all of a sudden we do have a mate threat. So he's got to play rook to f6 here to try to block that hole. But then now just bishop g5. We're going to win this rook. There's no way to defend it because the rook can't come up. The queen can come defend it, but that's not helpful because the queen's already defending it. Surely we don't want to bring the king up and have a cross pin. That would just be awful. I didn't really look into that or calculate it, but I just have to believe that there's going to be some way to bring in an additional piece into the attack here. And he's going to drop that. So after here, he plays queen to e7. And now d6, which is going to just throw the game away, or throw the win away anyway, because black has this move. And we can't take the queen. If we take the queen, we're just getting mated here. So we'd have to play, like, I guess rook takes knight, or knight takes rook, but then he's going to capture here, and we have an even material situation, and the attack is pretty well gone. White might be slightly better, but this is terrible. So this is what he played, but black returns the favor like tenfold, which I have a hard time understanding this move. I think they must have been in tremendous time pressure here, because he just plays queen takes d6 instead. And after that, after knight takes queen, he's just down a queen. So I'm not sure what he was thinking when he made that move, but that's just absolutely abhorrent. And of course, sacrifices. I mean, excuse me. Of course, he resigns after he's just dropped his queen. Not to mention that he's going to lose probably some more material pretty quickly anyway. So kind of a funny end to the game. Um, but remember, the queen doesn't have to make it to the H file or to D3. C2, it can do its job from there too. Because really the idea is just to create pressure against the king side, and in these examples we've been looking at, it's almost always been H7, and that's going to force some sort of a pawn weakness. And depending on the type of pawn weakness, there are several methods we've looked at for how to how to counter. To summarize, we've seen this bishop on H6, and then against G6, most commonly we've seen two different kinds of attacking. One is based on the dark squares that are weak against the king side, and then the second attack that we've seen, if you remember, is they swing the bishop back over here to A2, and usually with the knights on E5, we see a lot of attacks on the F7 square or the F7 E6 square combined. So, but this is the last game I have of these type of situations. We're going to move on to the next chapter in Baburn's winning pawn structures, which is what we've been following. The last games, or excuse me, not the last, but the next section is going to follow the H pawn battering ram. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to that, and we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye bye, guys.